Morning television is usually a soft cushion of laughter, coffee, and celebrity sparkle. The formula is simple. Keep it light, keep it safe, and let audiences sip their tea with a smile. But on this day, when a former Duchess and Hollywood actress settled onto the sofa of the popular morning show, the air grew heavy almost instantly. What began as polite chatter soon unraveled into one of the most confrontational interviews daytime TV had ever witnessed. The cameras swept across the bright studio, beams of sunlight pouring through wide glass windows, glinting off cheerful flowers carefully arranged on the coffee table. The theme music faded and the show began in its usual rhythm, but even then, a subtle tension pulsed beneath the polished smiles. The guest entered with poised grace, her hair flowing in loose, calculated waves, her expression perfectly sculpted, yet just detached enough to remind everyone she was not here to play along. When one of the hosts leaned in with open arms for a warm hug, she offered only a hand. It was a small gesture, but it carried the weight of a door being quietly shut. The audience applauded politely, sensing the contrast between the host's booming welcome and the guest's clipped politeness. From the start, the balance of power felt unsettled. The questions began lightly, as they always did. New projects, appearances, endless headlines. What was keeping her busy these days? But instead of leaning into charm, the guest's tone shifted toward sharp declarations. She spoke of purpose, of using her voice to elevate conversations, of refusing to be reduced to gossip. The words were polished, but the edges cut. One host tried to smooth it over, steering the conversation toward her latest project. She leaned back, crossing her legs with deliberate elegance, and spoke about truth, about allowing people to tell their stories without being manipulated into caricatures. A pointed jab the audience didn't miss. A ripple of laughter rolled through the studio, half supportive, half uneasy. The tension was building, and everyone could feel it. The other host pushed forward with forced cheer, asking about life away from the UK, her new home, her family balance. Was she happy? The guest's lips curved into a smile that never reached her eyes. Happiness, she declared, isn't a gift. It's a decision. And she had made hers. Polite applause followed, though it sounded thinner than before. The questions shifted to her marriage. How was the balance between her and her husband as they worked on separate projects? The reply came swift and sharp. No one asks men how they balance their careers with their wives, she snapped. We both have schedules, we manage, it isn't complicated. The warmth in the studio dipped again. Nervous laughter trickled from the hosts, but they pressed on, reminding her that the public adored the couple and was simply curious how they juggled life with children. Her voice stiffened further. We juggle privately. My children are not morning show material. A murmur spread through the crowd, as if the veil between the glossy television image and the raw reality had slipped just enough to leave everyone unsettled. One host, determined to keep the segment steady, pivoted to the business side. There had been reports about her streaming deal, whispers of demanding higher pay for the next season. What was her response? She gave a short, almost mocking laugh, her eyes flicking with disdain. When a man demands value, he's called a visionary. When a woman does, she's branded greedy. I don't chase pennies. I command worth. The audience clapped again, though the energy was fractured, some impressed, others uncomfortable. The host raised her brows, keeping her smile plastered in place, but the edge in her voice betrayed her effort to stay calm. Strong answer, she said, and then carefully she broached the subject that always hovered in the background. The monarchy. She had once called it outdated. Did she still feel that way? The guest's posture shifted. Her gaze grew cold. Tradition, she said, does not equal righteousness. Centuries of history don't erase harm. I don't romanticize institutions that wound. The room fell into silence. Even the audience, trained to clap on cue, seemed unsure. The cheerful facade cracked. The energy on set had transformed entirely. No longer the cozy bubble of daytime TV, but a battlefield of words. Behind the cameras, the control room buzzed. Producers leaned over one another, whispering, eyes darting between monitors. They knew they were witnessing something that would ripple beyond morning television. The interview was spiraling, and no amount of bright flowers or canned applause could disguise it. The male host cleared his throat, determined to steer the ship back to calmer waters. Let's talk about your creative side, he said, flashing his practiced smile as he shuffled his notes. Viewers are fascinated by your projects. Do you see yourself focusing on documentaries, scripted work, or even writing? The guest's eyes glinted as she delivered her answer. I don't box myself into categories, she said smoothly. I create. If that unsettles the industry, that's their problem. Her words dripped with condescension, polished enough to pass for inspiration, yet sharp enough to cut through the room. The hosts exchanged uneasy glances. One clapped her hands once, too brightly, as though trying to will the cheer back into existence. That's very empowering, she said, her tone too high, too forced. But with storytelling comes responsibility, wouldn't you agree? The tension had reached its peak. The set, once designed for comfort and charm, now felt like a cage of glass where every breath, every glance, every pause carried the weight of conflict. The audience sat on the edge of their seats, half thrilled, half uneasy, watching the clash unfold. And as the cameras rolled on, everyone in the room understood they were no longer filming a safe, fluffy morning segment. They were capturing live television history, a collision of ego, ideals, and unyielding pride that no one would soon forget. Morning television thrives on warmth, safe questions, bright laughter, and just enough sparkle to ease viewers into their day. But on this occasion, the usual recipe began to sour the moment the interview started. The guest sat elegantly on the sofa, her posture rigid yet regal, her every gesture controlled. When the questions turned personal, the tension sharpened. One of the hosts leaned forward with her trademark charm. Some critics say your work is heavily focused on your personal journey. Do you feel that's fair? The guest tilted her head, narrowing her eyes slightly. When men make films about their trauma, they win Oscars. When women do it, they're called narcissistic. The problem isn't my storytelling, it's society's bias. The audience, usually quick to clap or laugh, fell silent. The host forced a chuckle, fingers clasped tightly. I'm only asking what people wonder. Speaking of journeys, how's your husband? People miss him here in the UK. The guest's expression hardened. He doesn't belong to anyone. He isn't a souvenir Britain gets to miss like a postcard. He's my husband, and he's thriving without tabloid intrusion. The sharpness in her tone startled even the co-host, who quickly stepped in. Of course, of course. And the children? How are they settling away from the palace spotlight? For the first time, her smile vanished. My children are not for public consumption. The world doesn't get to demand progress reports as though they're contestants on a reality show. The host nodded stiffly, unease flickering in her eyes. Of course, we respect that. But families watching often relate to seeing public figures balance parenting. It inspires them. A cold laugh escaped. Then perhaps families at home should focus on their own children instead of obsessing over mine. The audience gasped softly, the atmosphere dipping another degree. The host sat straighter now, lips tight, eyes narrowing. The co-host tried to intervene. Let's shift to industry matters. There were reports you asked for a higher budget for the new season. Was it about money or creative control? She leaned back, arms crossed. Clarify? I don't clarify rumors. Netflix knows my value. If the press is shocked that a woman dares to negotiate, that's their scandal, not mine. The host's jaw tightened. But isn't it fair to say those negotiations keep your name in headlines? People see you stepping away from the monarchy yet still commanding global attention. Doesn't that contradict your desire for privacy? The reply came sharp as glass. Privacy doesn't mean silence. I didn't abdicate my humanity. I use my platform as I see fit. If people can't grasp that difference, it isn't my fault. A silence followed, thick and uneasy. The host softened her tone, but her patience was thinning. Surely you see why the public might be confused. You've spoken often about wanting peace, yet you remain in the spotlight. The guest gave a pointed stare. Peace doesn't mean vanishing. It means boundaries. If the public struggles with that, perhaps they're too used to women being compliant. The audience murmured, half in support, half in disapproval. The host forced a laugh, brittle and strained. You've always had strong words for the monarchy. Looking back, do you regret any of it? Her voice grew colder. Regret? None. The monarchy is a relic, polished for tourists, while it crushes those within. I spoke truth. I'll never apologize. The studio froze. The host blinked, stunned, then recovered with a shaky smile. Well, that's certainly one way to put it. The co-host jumped in, trying to spin. What she means is... But the guest cut him off. What I mean is exactly what I said. I don't need an interpreter. Gasps rippled through the audience. The host leaned back, inhaling slowly, her hands gripping the sofa. Her famed patience was slipping. The co-host cleared his throat nervously. Right, well, we'll take a short break, but before that, What do you hope people take from your work moving forward? The guest's reply was instant, her voice steady and cutting. That truth has no expiration date, no matter how much institutions or talk shows try to bury it. The words landed like a hammer. The host's smile collapsed, the warmth in her eyes gone, replaced by a flicker of cold resolve. When the cameras cut to commercial, the studio was silent except for the low buzz of whispered shock. Everyone present knew they weren't watching a typical morning chat. They were witnessing a collision between charm and defiance, between tradition and rebellion, an interview destined to be remembered as the moment civility cracked and the truth refused to bow. Morning shows were never designed for confrontation. They were meant to be a safe corner of television, laughter over coffee, playful banter, and celebrity charm. But on this day, that carefully polished image shattered live on air. The guest sat on the sofa, posture poised, every gesture calculated, every word heavy with edge. What began as small talk had spiraled into a battle of willpower, and the tension in the studio was sharp enough to cut. Criticism is often jealousy in disguise, the guest declared, her voice smooth but dripping with disdain. People like to tear down what they don't understand. I've stopped caring about winning over the masses. If they can't rise to my level, that's their burden. The audience shifted uncomfortably, sensing the hostility. One of the hosts, famous for her warmth, forced a strained laugh. Well, not everyone at home sees it that way. Some feel confused by the contradictions. You've spoken harshly against the monarchy, yet many point out you benefited from its titles, its visibility, its connections. The guest's head snapped toward her, the smile gone, her tone icy. Benefited? You mean survived? Do you have any idea what it's like to be chewed up by a machine and spit out as a caricature? The monarchy didn't hand me anything. I built who I am. My platform is mine, not theirs. The host's face tightened, her patience thinning. But with respect, your global recognition came because of that marriage. That gave you the stage you stand on today. Gasps rippled through the audience. The co-host jumped in quickly, voice soothing. What she means is... But the guest cut him off, eyes sharp. No, I heard exactly what she meant. And it's insulting. My worth isn't defined by a family tree. I'm not clinging to borrowed fame. The first host pressed forward, her cards gripped a little too tightly. Yet you continue to speak about the royals at every opportunity. Isn't that still clinging? If you truly wanted to move on, why keep bringing them up? The guest leaned back, posture dripping with arrogance. Because silence protects abusers. If that makes people uncomfortable, perhaps they should examine their own complicity instead of questioning me. The air in the studio tightened. Even the co-host's polished calm faltered. He shifted uneasily, trying to steer the moment back to safer ground. Let's not forget, her projects also focus on charity, wellness, giving back. But the warmth was gone from the other host's voice. It cut like a blade now. I don't question charity. I question the way you present yourself as a victim while living in luxury. People at home are struggling with bills, with reality, and do you understand how your words sound to them? The guest blinked, almost in disbelief. Luxury? Are we reducing my experience to the square footage of my home? That's beneath you. The host's voice rose, the famous laugh gone. What's beneath me is the arrogance you've shown since you sat down. Every question is jealousy, every criticism an attack. People are tired of being lectured by someone who claims to despise the crown but wore it gladly when it suited her. The studio erupted in shocked murmurs. The co-host raised his hands. All right, let's just... But she wasn't finished. Her eyes burned with resolve. You talk about surviving the monarchy, but the truth is, you used it. You used the spotlight, the global platform, the attention, and when it stopped serving you, you called it toxic. You can't have it both ways. For the first time, the guest looked rattled. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she straightened her blazer, eyes narrowing. I don't need to justify myself to morning show hosts. I've lived a truth bigger than this studio will ever comprehend. The words dripped with disdain. The host leaned forward, abandoning all pretense of bubbly professionalism. Truth or convenience? Because from where I sit, it looks like you milked every ounce of fame that marriage gave you. And when people pushed back, you painted yourself a martyr. That's not truth. That's performance, the audience gasped audibly, some clapping, others silent with shock. The co-host half rose from his seat, palms raised. We're live, let's not... But the host cut across, voice trembling but firm. Do you know how offensive it is to sit here morning after morning, Speaking with people who work for every bit of what they have, and then listen to you sneer about being misunderstood while cashing in on the very system you condemn? Enough is enough. A silence thundered through the studio. The guest crossed her arms, chin lifted high, her reply as cold as steel. If the public expected me to bow forever in gratitude for scraps, they chose the wrong woman. I will never apologize for refusing silence. Not for you, not for anyone. The host exhaled slowly, her voice calm but fierce. Then maybe this interview should end right here, because I won't sit here and watch you sneer at every question. This is a morning show, not your personal soapbox. The co-host scrambled, his voice rushed. Let's take a quick break, shall we? But the damage was done. The audience knew it. The producers knew it. And most of all, the guest knew it. The careful balance of civility had snapped, replaced by raw defiance and sharpened truth. The segment was no longer an interview. It was a reckoning, live, under studio lights. With no way back, beside him Allison sat upright, her shoulders squared and her eyes blazing with a mix of anger and resolve. Across from her, the guest leaned back with arms crossed and chin tilted defiantly, as though daring anyone to challenge her further. Dermot cleared his throat, trying to reset the tone. Welcome back to This Morning. We've been having a very candid conversation about projects, experiences, and empowerment. Let's try to steer this towards something positive. What message would you like to leave with our viewers today? A thin smile curled across her lips, but her voice carried an unmistakable edge. The message is simple, Dermot. Stop expecting women like me to constantly explain ourselves. Stop demanding gratitude for circumstances that came with as much pain as privilege. I don't owe anyone my silence, least of all a television audience. The crowd shifted uneasily, some clapping politely, others whispering. Allison exhaled, shaking her head slowly, her patience visibly fraying. No one here is demanding your silence, she replied, her tone calm but strained. But the way you've handled yourself today, dismissing every question, belittling every challenge, it's not strength. It's arrogance. Eyebrows shot up. Arrogance? Perhaps you should consider that my refusal to bow down to petty criticism is confidence, not arrogance. Maybe that's something you're not used to seeing in women like me. Gasps rippled through the audience. Allison froze for a moment, then leaned forward, her voice dropping to a lower, sharper register. Don't you twist this into some narrative about people being threatened by your strength. I've championed women my entire career. What I won't champion is rudeness, entitlement, and a complete lack of accountability. Dermot raised his hands in an attempt to intervene, but Allison's words thundered on, unstoppable. You say you hate the monarchy, that it destroyed you, that it suffocated you. But let's be real. You wouldn't be sitting on this sofa today if you hadn't married into it. You wouldn't have Netflix deals, book deals, or headlines. You used the crown when it suited you, then spat it out when it didn't. And now you sit here sneering at every question as though the world owes you something. Shocked murmurs erupted from the studio, some gasps even giving way to applause. The guest's face flushed crimson, her jaw tightening. How dare you suggest I used anyone? My marriage is about love. My life is my own. And if I've chosen to share parts of my truth with the world, that's my right. Allison didn't flinch. Love? Then why does it always look like you're cashing in on your husband's name? The man people actually respected before this circus has been reduced to a sidekick in your brand. You talk about independence, yet every door you've walked through was opened by him. Admit it, you leaned on his fame and you've milked it dry. The words struck like a hammer. The audience gasped louder than ever, some even applauding the bluntness. Dermot visibly panicked, urging calm, but the guest snapped, her voice sharp as glass. I will not sit here and be accused of exploiting my own husband on national television. This is a disgraceful ambush, and frankly, Allison, it says more about you than it does about me. Allison's reply was immediate and resolute. No, it says everything about you. The truth is, you strutted onto this set with nothing but condescension, mocking every question, acting like you're too important to be challenged. But this is not your personal PR machine. I won't sit here and let you talk down to us or our audience for one more second. The crowd erupted into applause, some even standing. The guest rose abruptly, yanking off her microphone, the wire snagging before she tore it free. Her movements were sharp and furious. She looked down at Allison, voice trembling with rage. You'll regret this. The world will see how you treated me today. Allison's answer cut through like steel. The world just saw exactly how you treated yourself. Don't blame me for that. With that, she spun on her heel and stormed off, her heels clacking like gunshots against the floor. The studio doors swung shut behind her, leaving stunned silence in her wake. Dermot sat frozen, glancing between Allison and the cameras. Allison finally exhaled and faced the audience, her tone softening with genuine regret. To everyone watching at home, I want to apologize for what just happened. That wasn't the interview we planned, and it certainly wasn't the tone we wanted. But sometimes live television shows people as they truly are, and today we all saw it. The audience erupted in applause, this time for Allison. Dermot nodded solemnly. We'll be back after the break. The cameras faded to black, but the damage was done. By afternoon, social media would be ablaze with headlines, hashtags, and endless debate. This fiery live clash would go down as one of the most shocking television moments in recent history.